Federal law has established minimum guidelines for states to develop their own laws to define and prevent child abuse. Although state laws vary in specifics, they all require professionals who work with children to report suspected child abuse and neglect. Mandated reporters include teachers, daycare workers, and other child care and school personnel, including bus drivers, coaches, and administrative workers. Medical professionals, including doctors, nurses, and paramedics. Police and law enforcement personnel, and social workers, psychologists, and other professionals who work with children and families. The laws are getting tougher all the time, and in some states, including New Mexico, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Indiana, Tennessee, and New Jersey, all citizens are required to report abuse to the authorities. Anyone can report abuse anonymously, and even if you are not legally mandated to report child abuse, your intervention can save a child. Throughout the nation, Child Protective Service agencies have been established to help child abuse victims and their families. In addition to these civil service organizations, you may also be required to report suspected abuse to the police. To simplify the process and enable you to report possible abuse to the right agencies, Child Help, a leading national nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of child abuse and neglect, has set up a Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4-A-CHILD. When you call the hotline, the operator will listen to your information, ask you a series of questions, and provide you with advice. If the situation is a reportable incident, the operator will provide resources, including the emergency contact information for the Child Protective Service agency in your area. But don't wait for an incident to occur. Be prepared and proactive in the fight against child abuse by developing a relationship with your local Child Protective Services agency. Many Child Protective Service agencies offer in-depth training seminars and have other resources available to help you recognize child abuse. Most importantly, having contacts at Child Protective Services might further enable you to help a child if you ever have to report a situation. If you suspect child abuse, contact Child Protective Services and provide them with as much detail about the situation as you can. As a mandated reporter, you may be asked to fill out forms or present written statements. It is important to note that when you request an investigation, you are not accusing someone of child abuse. All you need is reasonable suspicion to make a report. As long as you report in good faith, you are protected from legal action. One of the most common reasons that people don't report suspected child abuse is that they fear that by making a report, the abuse could get worse. It is easy to imagine an abuser taking vengeance on a child or doing something drastic to keep a child from talking. Regardless of the perceived danger, the best way to protect a child is always to report suspected abuse. If you ever feel that a child might be harmed, it's critical that you report the abuse immediately and inform the operator that you think the child's life may be in danger. We've all heard stories of child abuse that went unreported. When this happens, the abuse continues, children suffer unnecessarily, and more children could become victims. To combat child abuse, most organizations have implemented their own internal reporting policies and procedures. Know and follow your organization's rules. But be aware that as a mandated reporter, you are legally obligated to ensure that reportable situations are brought to the attention of Child Protective Services. Even if you have only heard about allegations of abuse through the grapevine, you should double-check that a report was made to Child Protective Services. It is a crime for mandated reporters to fail to report child abuse. The consequences for failure to report can be serious and could result in suspension of professional licenses, dismissal, fines, lawsuits, and criminal conviction. Now that we've reviewed your responsibility to report child abuse, let's examine what child abuse is and put the different categories of abuse into context. The Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, CAPTA, defines child abuse and neglect as, at minimum, any recent act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker which results in death, serious physical injury, emotional harm, sexual abuse, or sexual exploitation of a child, or an act or failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm to a child. While federal legislation sets minimum standards, each state has defined its own interpretation of what constitutes child abuse.